What I want to share with you is not a technical analysis or a conventional talk about women in tech. It's something much deeper, and it's very personal to me. It's a conversation about systems and the way systems quietly shape who we become, what choices we can make, and where possibilities can begin and end. It connects closely with the book that's being presented here today, because that book also explores how structures, expectations, and invisible forces shape our experiences long before we ever stop questioning them. My own journey into this work goes back almost 20 years. In August 2015, when I created Girl Geek Dinners, which I know some of you that are here today attended. And it's not because I thought that I was starting a movement back then, but because I was tired of being an anomaly. I was tired of walking into rooms full of engineers and being the only woman there. Tired of attending technical events where women were counted in single digits. Tired of working in embedded medical systems and seeing so few women in the labs and in the teams, in the leadership structures and in the workplace. And I was tired of the casual dismissals, the subtle jokes and the quiet signals that said you don't really belong here. It was never one big movement. It was the accumulation of small, consistent patterns, the lack of female attendance at events, the lack of respect of women's contributions, and the low expectations of women that were working in technical fields. The questioning of women's technical confidence before they ever even opened their mouths was astounding. It was seeing those women shrinking to make themselves accepted, seeing the talented women pushed out and sidelined or worn down, and at some point those patterns became impossible to ignore, especially for me. So Girl Geek Dinners started as a simple idea, creating a space where women could meet, learn and be taken seriously, without constantly having to prove that they deserved to be in the room. I thought at the time maybe 15 people would show up, and what happened instead was a chain reaction. It spread from one city to another and then one country to another and eventually became a global network. The speed of that growth told me something critical. That women were not lacking ambition, they were not lacking interest, they were lacking an environment that was designed for them. When better environments existed, women arrived in numbers, and the insight that changed everything that I've done ever since came from that. And this is why people say the system's broken, and I look at it and I go, no, the system's functioning exactly as it was designed. The challenge is that it was never designed for women. Most technical cultures are built around outdated models about the ideal worker. Someone with unlimited availability, no caring responsibilities, someone who can stay late without notice, someone who can travel at a moment's notice, someone who has uninterrupted support behind the scenes, and someone who never needs flexibility and who is always visible. That model made sense in a different era. It does not work in a world where women make up half of the population, half of the talent, and half of the intelligence. But the structures of work have barely shifted, and what we now see is not disorder, it's a mismatch, a system built for one type of life, being used by everybody. The numbers make this very clear. Women represent around 24% of the workforce, and only around 5% reach senior leadership roles. And the most alarming figure is this. Roughly half of women leave the tech sector entirely by mid-career. Not moving to another tech company, but leaving the industry entirely. The financial cost in the UK alone is the equivalent loss of £2.4 billion to £4.1 billion every year. But the human cost is far higher. The loss of talent, the loss of innovation, the loss of leadership, and the loss of potential. That 50% attrition stat is widely quoted but rarely understood. Women are not leaving because they don't enjoy work. Many actually report really high job satisfaction. The mid-career drop-off happens between year 8 and year 12, the point where careers typically accelerate. This is the phase where sponsorship matters. When networks start to shape opportunities and where progression depends not on competence but on visibility, influence, and informal support. And these pathways are not evenly distributed. This is where systems become more restrictive, and I know this personally. Early in my career working in embedded medical systems, someone kept telling me casually, "You don't look particularly technical," or "You look lovely today." And it was almost said as a compliment. But that's exactly how bias works. It whispers and it nudges and it shapes perception long before merit has a chance to speak. And credibility is eroded quietly, one comment at a time, undermining anything that you build. And if you speak up and you speak to women across Europe, these stories are eerily similar. Being talked over, having ideas dismissed until a man repeats them, being praised for teamwork but being overlooked for leadership, being over-mentored and under-sponsored, and being the glue that holds the teams together but doesn't enhance progression, being told they're not quite ready for the roles that they're already performing. And none of this, unfortunately, is random. These are structural patterns. Underneath these patterns lies what I call the leverage gap. Leverage is a combination of networks, sponsorship, visibility, influence, and information that moves careers forward. Men accumulate leverage naturally through long-standing systems and networks. Women often start with less leverage, not because they lack ability, but because the structures of opportunity are not built to include them. Leverage determines who gets invited to the table, who gets stretched, who gets championed, who gets promoted, and who gets a second chance, and even who gets believed. I experienced the power of leverage myself. The visibility created for Girl Geek Dinners opened doors I had never imagined. It eventually led to an invite to speak at the UN and also to mentor young people at the UN starting their own businesses. Not because I had a massively senior title, not because I was excellent at my technical role, but because I'd spent decades understanding about visibility and leverage and the opportunities that it creates. This is why so many women are missing in tech. It's not confidence, it's not competence, it's leverage. And what I've come to understand over the past 2 decades is that women in tech are not the root issue. They're a symptom. They've always been a symptom, a visible symptom of a deeper systematic problem. The inequality we see in tech is a result of layers of structural design choices that go far beyond the workplace. It begins in childhood, in schools, in healthcare, in the way that the labour markets are organised, in the expectations placed on families, in the economic policies shaping who can work, for how long and at what cost and under what conditions. Women in tech is simply one of the clearest places where all of these layers combine. I want to say something very clearly here. Women in tech are enough. They deserve to be hired fairly. They deserve to be promoted on merit. They deserve equal pay. They deserve respect for their expertise. They've worked hard. They deserve workplaces that see their potential rather than their perceived limitations. We all carry scars from bias, bullying, exclusion, and dismissal. And many women don't speak up when work hasn't worked for them. So they use their feet instead of their voices. They leave, and the industry loses the very talent it needs to solve the problems for the future. So the question is, if the system is outdated, why haven't we changed it? And the answer is simple, it's structural inertia. At the senior level, organisations talk about inclusion. They talk about gender equality. But the structures underneath those promises tell a different story. Promotion frameworks that reward visibility rather than delivery. Performance systems that are subjective. Workload expectations that assume unlimited behaviour and availability. Leadership pipelines built on informal sponsorship networks dominated by men. Flexibility they access on paper, but is punished in practice. And DEI efforts collapse under the political pressures. When values and structures conflict, structures win. And that's why progress has been so painfully slow. Not because people don't care or that men don't want this either. They do. It's because the architecture hasn't changed, and no amount of workshops can compensate for flawed structures. But here's the hopeful truth. Women are not powerless. Inside these systems, there are practical strategies that women can use right now to protect their momentum and build leverage. Even in environments that are slow to evolve, women can make friction visibility early. Women can document contributions and blockers with clarity and consistency. They can set boundaries around glue work so that their career capital isn't eroded. And women can seek sponsorship instead of setting up for mentorship alone. Women can cultivate networks that provide access, information, and an influence. And women can challenge biased language, fixed tones, readiness, and evidence and precision of what their problems are. Women can position themselves for promotion using data rather than hope. And these strategies don't fix the system, but they stop the system from stopping women. And when women use these tools collectively, something powerful happens. The system becomes visible, and the visible systems are harder to ignore. Once organisations see the pattern clearly, they can no longer rely on excuses, especially when it's documented. This is where my current work sits. So through Girl Geek Network and through the book that I'm writing, I'm formalising 20 years of insights into platforms designed to support women's leverage, visibility, safety and progression. A platform that helps women navigate the system strategically whilst we continue to push for structural change. Because two things must happen at once. Systems must change, and women deserve the tools to navigate the systems that exist today, not 10 years from now. Women do not need to be fixed. The systems do. But women deserve every tool, every strategy, every piece of insight that helps them protect their momentum and build careers that reflect their skills, not their circumstances. The future of tech can't be built by repeating the structures that held women back, and it can't be built on invisible labour or outdated work models, or on selective sponsorship or skewed definitions of readiness of leadership. The future of technology must be built on redesigning the frameworks that shape opportunity. By valuing talent rather than tradition, and by expanding on what leadership looks like. By removing the friction that has drained women's potential for decades. Women in tech are not the problem. Women in tech are the solution, and they always have been. And if we built systems that recognise that truth, we will really create a world where women don't just survive in this industry, they thrive. And when women thrive, the industry thrives, innovation thrives, and society thrives.
Girls in tech, listen up, it's time to shine.